So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
The Detroit Lions have a huge week in front of them. As free agency officially opens today, the Lions are in a very particular spot, being one of the best reigning teams in the NFL with having some of the most cap space throughout the NFL. There's a lot of news and a lot of rumors surrounding this team. Players that may be interested in joining the Detroit Lions, players the Detroit Lions may be interested in bringing back through free agency. And this week, I think, will be a massive stepping stone in how the Detroit Lions are going to shape up for the 2024 season. Now, even as early as a couple of hours ago, we've gotten some breaking news. And of course, throughout the week, we will have a ton of rumors and a ton of news to break. But today, we're going to do a little bit of a catch-up video over the last week, take a look at some of the newest signings by the Detroit Lions, take a look at some of the rumors by the Detroit Lions, and get a good look at this team going into free agency that officially opens at 12 o'clock today on Monday. So with that being said, let's open up with the most recent news. As Glasgow, as early as this morning, about 10 o'clock, 9:30 a.m., signed a 3-year, $20 million contract with the Detroit Lions to remain as the starting right guard and backup center. Glasgow was phenomenal last year. He is a player that the Detroit Lions leaned on heavily throughout the season. He played starting right guard for a majority of the year, and when Frank Ragnow missed a couple of games, he slided over to the backup center, and he was able to be pretty good at that role as well. 3 years, $20 million for a player that is 30, I believe 30, maybe 31 years old, has about 2 to 3 years left in the tank. I think it's a good now signing. I think it's a pretty good value signing. He's, in my opinion, one of the top 10 to 15 guards in the NFL, at least he was last year. I think this is a phenomenal signing by the Detroit Lions. He allowed very few pressures, very few sacks last year, was great in the run game, was phenomenal in the playoffs, and phenomenal all season for the Detroit Lions. I do think this means potentially that Jonah Jackson will not be returning to the Detroit Lions, but again, that is very much remain to be seen. They still have some opportunities to re-sign him. They still have the opportunity to bring back both guards. But clearly, as we mentioned before, Glasgow was their priority, and they were able to bring back the former Michigan Wolverine for 3 years, $20 million. 9.5 of that is guaranteed, and it should really be more of a 2-year contract, but officially goes through the year 2027. A couple other players the Lions have re-signed this week include Michael Badgley, the kicker, who's returning on a 1-year contract. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who's returning on a 2-year, $8 million contract. Emmanuel Mosley, who's returning on a 1-year, $2 million contract. And Zonovan Knight, who is returning on a 1-year, $1 million contract. Michael Badgley was the kicker for the Detroit Lions down the stretch of the 2023 season, did not miss a kick after being elevated from the practice squad, and at the very least ensures that the Detroit Lions don't once again move backwards in the kicking game. Kicker has been a big problem for the Detroit Lions over the last couple of years. Michael Badgley has probably been the most stable and brought the most stability to the position that they've seen in the Brad Holmes era, and I think it's very important to at least keep that around at a minimum and try to improve upon it through the draft. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, the all-pro core special teamer from last year, 2-year, $8.5 million contract, phenomenal player, great teammate, team captain, very much deserved it. Emmanuel Mosley on an incredibly cheap deal, 1 year, I believe $2 million at its max. He is a player that will return, hopefully stay healthy this year for the Detroit Lions and to come in to be potentially the cornerback 1 or cornerback 2 of this defense. Zonovan Knight, a player that really didn't get a great opportunity with the Lions due to injury last year, but a player that was great with the Jets 2 years ago, somebody that had some hype coming out of the draft, and just somebody that overall I think the Lions want to keep around to compete for running back 3. Now, the Lions have also tendered 2 restricted free agents this year, that being both Brock Wright as well as Craig Reynolds. The Lions are now 4 deep at running back, and they brought back really their backup tight end on the season. I think they're 2 really good depth moves the Detroit Lions should have made, and I think they're great moves that the Lions did make. Now, with that being said, that leaves a couple of big names still on the board for the Detroit Lions, mainly being, of course, Josh Reynolds, the wide receiver, who has been instrumental to the Detroit Lions' success over the last couple of seasons, unlocking Jared Goff and making him comfortable, being a great wide receiver too, and a big play threat in big moments. And unfortunately, the NFC Championship seems like it could potentially be Reynolds' last game as a Detroit Lions. I hope they still bring him back. I think he'd be a great player to have back. But unfortunately, I think the price tag might be just a little too high for Reynolds at this moment. CJ Gardner-Johnson played in just 5 games for the Detroit Lions last year, but came away with 2 interceptions, was pretty good down the stretch, and was a really, really big part in the playoffs of the Detroit Lions' success. I think he brings a lot of confidence to the defense. I think he brings a lot of good plays to the defense. I think he's a good versatile piece for the defense. Do I think he's necessarily worth bringing back on a $10 million contract? No, but if it's somewhere in the realm of $5 to $6 million, potentially, or you test the market with somebody more like Quandre Diggs or Justin Simmons or a number of the 150 safeties that seem to be available this year in free agency, I think the market for CJ might go down, and I think it might be a good value to bring him back at $4 million a season. As we mentioned earlier, Jonah Jackson is no longer a member of the Detroit Lions, most likely after signing Graham Glasgow last night. He is likely no longer on the table for the Lions. I think big money on top of an injury-riddled season over the last couple of years has led the Detroit Lions really to not having a choice. You can't pay big money to a player that's not going to play a majority of games or is going to miss 3 to 4 to 5 games a season for you. I love Jonah Jackson. I think the offense is much better when he's on the field, but I also think he's replaceable. I don't think he does anything that, say, Jackson Powers Johnson couldn't do, that a couple of the first-round guards couldn't do. I think Jonah's phenomenal, but I also wouldn't pay Jonah Jackson $12 to $16 million a season if he's only going to play 13 to 14 games a season. Now, Graham Glasgow was on this list last night. It was all made last night. He, of course, was signed. And then Jason Kabinda is really the other big name player that hasn't been signed. A couple of players, a couple of ERFAs, exclusive right free agents. I think James Houston and Coyote Awaskia are players that have not been signed by the Detroit Lions yet, but very much could be. And I think players that are still very much on the radar of Brad Holmes and the Lions that could very well have an opportunity to return. Now, taking a look at some of the rumors this year, we're taking a look at both L'Jarius Sneed as well as Greg Newsome being potential trade targets for the Detroit Lions. Now, the L'Jarius Sneed one has been a big part of the Lions for a while. He's been a player that a lot of guys have talked about. He's been a player that a lot of fans want. Seems like it's going to cost about a second-round pick as well as a $20 million a year contract for the Detroit Lions to go get number 38 from the Kansas City Chiefs. But a potential cheaper option has emerged recently as the Browns have seemingly been shopping third-year cornerback Greg Newsome, a player that last year was a starting cornerback on a defense that allowed just 125 passing yards a game. I think the compensation would be closer to a third-round pick for Greg Newsome, as well as being a little bit cheaper from the financial and monetary side. Greg Newsome is still a phenomenal cornerback. I think he's a player the Lions could very much go after. Only 23 years old, already finding success in the NFL. Again, being a boundary starting cornerback for one of the league's best passing defenses a year ago. Greg Newsome, I think, is very much on the table if he's being shopped, but I also think there's an opportunity for the Lions to make a big splash and really go out and get L'Jarius Sneed. The trade options are not the only rumors being talked about by the Detroit Lions this week, as the Lions have had quite a few free agency rumors. Of course, that being with them having so much cap space and being such a good team last year, there's a lot of stars that seem to be interested in the Detroit Lions, mainly Christian Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins, a defensive tackle that has been a star in Miami for the last couple of seasons, seems to be very interested in a team that can compete, seems very interested in a team that can pay him the money he's worth and potentially take him on a ride to the Super Bowl. And the Lions fit that description, and the Lions fit that criteria. There seems to be a big and massive interest from Christian Wilkins in the Detroit Lions from rumors going around on Twitter and social media. Seems to be that Christian Wilkins has interest in seemingly the Lions and the Texans as his top 2 options. I think the Lions can potentially outbid him as well as being a potential better opportunity. Pairing Christian Wilkins with Aleem McNeil, I think, would give the Detroit Lions one of the better, if not the best, interior defensive lines in the NFL. And again, going with Aiden Hutchinson, potentially drafting edge rusher, your defensive line looks really, really scary going into 2024. And of course, Stephon Gilmore has been in the news quite a bit for the Lions. Named the best free agency fit for Gilmore was the Detroit Lions, as the Lions need a number one corner. Stephon Gilmore needs a number one home to go and be that number one cornerback. But with all of that being said, that is really all we have today. That is kind of the catch up from the last week or so of news and rumors. The Lions have brought back quite a few special teams guys, have brought back quite a few core players, and still haven't brought back a ton of stars or a ton of starters outside of Graham Glasgow, but they are working on some deals. Officially, free agency opens later today, so be interested to see what happens. Be interested to see who the Lions sign, who the Lions have interest in. If there are signings today, I will see you guys a little bit later. Until then, and with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below how you guys feel about this so far, how you feel about the re-signings, who you want to see the Lions sign through free agency or potentially trade for in this period. And with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.